The Israel-Palestine conflict is mostly about two groups of people who claim the same land. It really only began about a century ago in the early 1900s. Around then, the region on the eastern Mediterranean Sea we now call Israel-Palestine have been under Ottoman control for centuries. It was very religiously diverse, including approximately 86% Muslims, 10% Christians, and 4% Jewish, who all lived generally in peace. It was changing in two main ways. First, more people in the region were developing a sense of not being just ethnic Arabs, but Palestinians, a distinct national identity. At the same time, not so far away in Europe, more Jews were joining the movement Zionism, whose goal was to create a Jewish homeland. And after years of persecution, many people believed that a homeland was the only way to safety. They saw their historic homeland in the Middle East as their best option. In the first decade of the century, tens of thousands of Jews moved there.
After World War I, the Ottoman Empire collapsed and the British and French carved up the Middle East, with the British taking control of a region called the British Mandate for Palestine. At first, this immigration created no problems. However, as more and more Zionists immigrated to Palestine, many with the express wish of taking over Palestine for a Jewish state, the indigenous people became increasingly alarmed. Eventually, fighting broke out and waves of violence escalated.
Then came the Holocaust, leading many Jews to flee Europe for British Palestine and colonizing much of the world in support of the Jewish homeland. Finally, in 1947, the United Nations decided to intervene under considerable Zionist pressure. The UN recommended giving away 55% of Palestinian land to a Jewish state, despite the fact that the group only represented about 30% of the total population and owned under 7% of the land of the city Jerusalem, the holy site for the Jews, Muslims, and Christians. It became an international zone. The Jews accepted the plan and declared independence as Israel, but the Arabs viewed the plan as more European colonialism. Trying to steal the land, many Arab states declared war on the one-day-old state of Israel.
The Israel-Arab conflict began when Palestinian aggression spurred because of the creation of the Balfour Doctrine. The Balfour Doctrine was a document created in 1917 which gave the Jews a national home in Palestine, in order to give the scattered Jewish population a homeland. This doctrine was first created by the British, as they were in control of Palestine, but then passed on to the United Nations to vote on the issue. After the members of the United Nations voted positively on the issue, Palestine was separated into two states, the Jewish state of Israel and an Arabian state. However, the new state borders separated each country into multiple parts, which would allow for conflict to easily occur. Not only were the states separated oddly, but they were also separated unequally. The Israeli state contained about 55% of the Palestinian land, while the Arabian state was left with only 45% of their land. This made the Palestinians feel mistreated and angry with British and Israelis. Arabs who lived in the new Israeli state prior to the Balfour Doctrine soon fled and became refugees in Arabian states. One of the main points of conflict between these new borders was concerning who would have the rights to worship at the Western Wall. The Western Wall was considered a holy land by both Muslim and Jewish religions. The argument over who should have rights of worship spurred Palestinian riots against Jewish civilians. The Palestinians threw rocks and bombed the Jews as a result. The Suez Crisis was the first main battle of the Israel-Palestine conflict. During the Suez Crisis, Israel marched into Egypt and was later joined by British and French forces. The reason for Israel attacking the Suez Canal was that the Egyptian leader, Gamal Abdel Nasser, nationalized it, solely putting its ownership under Egypt. Soon after the British and French forces got involved, they took an area of land around the Suez Canal. In retaliation to this, the Soviet Union began to supply the Egyptians with troops by sending them through Czechoslovakia. They also helped them with constructing the Aswan Dam on the Nile River. After the United States refused, as the fighting continued, Russia soon came in to stop the dispute. They threatened the British, French, and Israeli forces with nuclear warfare. As the United States learned of this, they realized that the use of nuclear warfare would not end well, so they also threatened the British, French, and Israeli forces. However, their threat was much less severe, concerning economic sanctions if the group did not stop their attack. The threats worked and they would soon retreat from Egypt.
The second major battle of the Palestine-Israel conflict was the Six Days War. Prior to the Six Days War, Palestinian groups began using high amounts of guerrilla warfare against the Israelis. In retaliation, the Israelis' forces striked a village within West Bank, killing 18 people. Soon after, the Egyptians blockaded Israel and mobilized forces on the Sinai Peninsula. Outnumbered, the Israeli forces launched an unexpected air assault, taking out about 90% of the Egyptian Air Force. This left them vulnerable, and the Israelis took advantage of this and soon won. They conquered the Gaza Strip and the entire Sinai Peninsula up to the east bank of the Suez Canal, disregarding Israel's prior advice for Jordan to stay out of the fight. Jordanian forces defended West Jerusalem. The Israelis countered with a powerful attack, pushing the Jordanian forces out of East Jerusalem and West Bank. After this fight, the United Nations called a ceasefire, which was accepted by Israel, Jordan, and Egypt. However, Syria did not accept the ceasefire and began to fortify villages in northern Israel. The Israelis attacked Golan Heights in response and effortlessly won. Syria then signed the ceasefire. As a result of the Six-Day War, Israel gained about 60% of the Palestinian land, further limiting their borders.
The last main battle of the Israel-Arab conflict was the Battle of Yom Kippur. The new Egyptian president, Anwar al-Sadat, wanted peace with Israel, but realized peace terms wouldn't be favorable for his country. Instead, he planned to regain the lost land to later discuss peace terms. In hopes of regaining the 23,500 square miles of land that they lost to Israel in the 6 Days War, Egyptian and Syrian forces planned a surprise attack on the holiest Jewish holiday, Yom Kippur. During Yom Kippur, the Jewish people did not eat or drink water for 24 hours in order to sacrifice and feel pain for their wrongdoing. The Egyptian and Syrian forces took this as an advantage as they realized that the Israelis would be weak and away from their posts. Egyptian troops began successfully as they swept deep into the Sinai Peninsula. On the other hand, the Syrian forces struggled to overthrow Golan Heights. Israel used its defense forces to push back the attack with a large cost of troops and supplies. Although Israel was successful, they lost a lot of troops and supplies in the making. A ceasefire was brought about by the United Nations soon after. While Syria lost much more of Golan Heights to Israel, Egypt made peace negotiations with Israel and gained back the Sinai Peninsula. Israel and Egypt later formed the Camp David Accords to grant lasting peace between the two and set the foundation of peace in the Middle East. Following the Camp David Accords, Israel and Palestine began the Oslo Process, which had an ultimate goal of peace. During the Oslo Process, Israel and the PLO had a secret conference to discuss peace. These discussions led to the Oslo Accords, and peace with self-government between the two.